Visual Studio includes a feature that allows us to visualize all of the classes in our project. And it's very useful when we're doing object-oriented programming, when we're creating lots of classes and when we want to make objects out of those and we want to see how everything fits together. It's a feature that not a lot of people realize is there, and it's certainly optional. This is not the way you have to do your code, but some of you may find that this provides a very visual and sort of simplified way to get started on a class. It's called the Class Diagram tool, and to access it you need to have your project open already, and in the Solution Explorer we want to right click on the project name and select View Class Diagram. And when I do that, Visual Studio will grind away for a moment because it's going to look at all the files in my project and it's going to determine what all the classes are, and it's going to draw a diagram of those classes, very similar to those of you who are familiar with UML. It's very similar to a UML diagram. In fact, it's meant to represent that. So this project only has one class in it. It's called Program, and if I expand it I can see that the Program class has one method called Main. If I had more classes, obviously those would be represented, and there would be arrows to represent inheritance and all the things that we're familiar with. But in addition to showing us what all of our classes are, I can also use this class diagram to create new classes. So I'll scoop this one out of the way, and I'm just going to right click and say Add Class. It's going to give me a dialog box to ask for the name of the class. I can set the modifier, the access modifier for it, and then I can choose where to put it. C# does allow us to have multiple classes in one file, so I could put this in the program.cs file. My preference is to give each class its own file, unless I have some specific reason to want to group them together. And this is partly because I also program a lot in Java, and that's the way we do things there. But I think that for beginners it helps keep things clear if we just keep our classes in individual files. And so I like to just leave that as Create New File. And for this little demonstration I'll call this Circle. I'm not really going to make a complete circle class, but I just want to demonstrate a few things. And then I'll hit OK. And a couple things are going to happen. While it's grinding away there, coming up with a little class diagram, we're going to see that it also adds a file called circle.cs. Now that part of it is exactly the same as just adding a new class this way, or some of you may do it by right clicking to add a class that way. But there is a difference. If we create this class through the diagrammer, it will do its best to write as much of the code as it can. And so let me demonstrate how that works. I'll select my circle class, and I have a pane down at the bottom where I can put in some details. And so let's add some, I always like to start with fields, so let's add some fields to our circle. The main thing that we need to keep track of regarding our circle is the radius. So I'll put in radius there. It's a field, so I'm using a lowercase letter, lowercase r. We'll give it a type. I'm just going to use double as the type. And since it's a field, we generally keep our fields private. If I want to type a summary, essentially like a comment, I can, but I don't need to worry about that here. And if I just keep pressing tab, it will go to the next line, and I can add another field. I don't know what else my circle needs to contain. Maybe I'll have it a color, I don't know, and I'll just make color a string to keep things simple. Again, I'm not intending to really solve a problem here, just to demonstrate. But each time I add one of these, what you can see is that that field is being, that member, we would say, is being added to my diagram. Okay, and I can do the same thing now with properties. Maybe radius is going to be a property, so I'll have a capital R this time, and it will also be a double, and this time it will be public. And then I'll want to get the, let's say I want to be able to get the area of the circle. Now I'm not going to keep track of that as a field because I can just calculate it whenever I need to know, and I can return the calculation. And again, I can see that those are being added up there. And if I want to have a method, I can add methods. It's just going to keep populating this class diagram. The best part of this class diagrammer for our purposes here is that as I've been adding those to the details pane, and they've been in turn added to my diagram, they have also been added to my source code. And so I can get to the source code by double clicking on it here. And what you'll see is that it has made my two fields for me. And it's made my property for me, my two properties, excuse me. And it's, I call these stubs. I say it's sort of stubbed out the code. So it throws an exception if you try and use this method, because it's trying to let us know, hey, you haven't written any code here. You probably want to write some code. And so maybe I'll just do something like return this dot radius, so that the getter for the property radius returns the value of the radius. And in my setter, I could write whatever code I needed to do. Here, I could get rid of that, and I could do whatever calculation I need to do. And anytime I want to go back to see the class diagram, I can double click on that here and get it back. I also should mention that it will add in reverse too. It will do the opposite if I want to create a field by writing code. And so let's say I have a, I don't know, we'll have a name for our circle. I don't know why we would have that, but if I create a field there and now go back to my class diagram, it has added that here and say, oh, well, name that, maybe that doesn't really make much sense, so I could delete that, and sure enough I come back over here and that code is deleted. So again, it's totally optional because I haven't really accomplished anything that I couldn't have done just by typing all of this. But some people prefer this visual approach, and if you have a project already that has a bunch of classes in it, sometimes looking at the class diagram can be useful to see how all the pieces fit together. So this is the class diagram tool.